It's I'll call to order the Concord Transportation Advisory Committee meeting of July 18th, 2024, and start with a roll call. Nick,
Here.
Laura,
Here.
Mariana,
Here.
Phil.
Here.
Okay, and myself, Mark Aylis. I think I got everybody. The business is to revise and approve a letter of a comment letter for Massachusetts Department of Transportation regarding their posted Route 2 corridor study for districts 3 and 4. Laura, thank you, Laura, for putting together a comprehensive draft. I hope I'm not going to be too ambitious, but I want to move a lot of things around, and what I will do is both send everybody a rewrite if you are at a computer, and then I can also put it on the screen and we can kind of walk through it. So let me just see if people can get this as a backup, but I can also share screen, I think, right, and pull it up on my screen. Okay, so I'm going to share screen, share, and get the document up. Okay, so can people see the document? Is it big enough? Is it clear enough?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, so backing up a minute. So what I thought, in order to be most effective, we want to be very focused on what MassDOT has been tasked with. And so on a high level, what I'm proposing is that I'm proposing we kind of break it into three pieces. So one of them would be a general comment section, and I've moved some things around and added some things to what Laura created. One would be sort of general comments where we really emphasize kind of high level policy goals and stuff that we want. So we'll come back to this, but to kind of fine tune it and see if people agree. But kind of getting out this safe connectivity between Concord Center and West Concord, the two village centers of the town, should be enhanced, not diminished by any changes to the Route 2 corridor in Concord. Something like that, I think, has to it's beneficial if that kind of policy thing gets put right up front so that it's always addressed in any ongoing studies, et cetera. And we can go over some other things. And then jumping to the bottom, I think that instead of complaining about the limited scope, it's appropriate for us to put in, whether it's number 3 or number 4, whatever, suggestions for inclusion in future studies. And so that I've moved some of Laura's draft comments for, redesign of the Concord Rotary is definitely something we think needs to be in future studies, including interaction with MCI Concord closing and development opportunities and things. I think that grade separated crossings were left out of the study, but they should be analyzed, for the other crossings in future studies. That's certainly something useful. And I think that with regard to mode shift, that's worth mentioning. Should probably call it a C. There's some fine tuning here. Oh, I have to, excuse me a second. Oops. I just do. Viewing, reviewing.
Mark, I think it's going to be pretty hard for us, for me personally, to make comments on something that I haven't read.
Okay.
It looks like there's some pretty significant changes to this document, and I would like to read it thoroughly to understand how it's changed.
Okay.
I like the approach. I'll just say that. Conceptually, what you're doing.
Okay, I sent everybody a copy.
Do you want comments yet, or do you want to keep going through it, Mark? Sorry.
Let me present a approach for consideration. We can always go back to the original draft that Laura did, but let me kind of make a case for why I think this will be more effective. I didn't eliminate a lot of what was in the draft. But I guess what I'm saying is that to me, it's sort of a three-pronged approach of what are our major sort of policy goals, transportation goals, criteria that MassDOT should always include in any consideration of this corridor through Concord, they managed through Concord. The second thing would be talking about specific, some reactions, comments on specific conceptual designs that they put forward. But I think we have to be careful there that we are not transportation infrastructure engineers or planners. And so while we can comment on those designs and it's useful, both our level of professional qualification and the fact that they are high level plans that MassDOT is also saying are just, just for consideration, just to kind of put something out there for people to look at. In no way are they fully detailed plans. I think that we don't want to overemphasize the importance of tax comments on those particular hypothetical proposals, but rather what should apply to any consideration of modifications to the Route 2 corridor. So we could I'm open to suggestions about what's most productive, but I think it's useful to well, first of all, do people agree that an approach like that, and then the might be useful, and this the middle section, whether it's number 2 or number 3, would be feedback on some concept design examples, because those are kind of getting more specific. But at the same time, I'm a little bit afraid if we focus too much on those examples, we're kind of setting ourselves up to have the rug pulled out from under us, because MassDOT apparently, VHB probably prepared multiple versions, and then they selected out of 5 or 6 or 7 versions for each crossing the ones that they wanted to put in the report. And then, they can always say, well, this is just conceptual. You're disagreeing with this or that. I'm not sure if our comments will have lasting impact if we provide them only in that format.
Yeah, I support what you're doing, because I think it's important to respond to so they've created a conceptual design. They're not designs, they're concepts for how to deal with the various intersections. It's important that we respond at the level of concepts and not get too deep into things that would be considered specific engineering designs. So I think that's very important.
And
Also,
go ahead.
I agree with you on the issue of scope, which is that the people who did this are, they're responding to a charge they were given in scope that was defined for them by representatives and senators and the management of MassDOT. And we have to be very careful. I like the way you're doing it, moving any comments about scope into a separate section at the back, because my fear is that if we provide feedback to them that has scope issues mingled with design issues, mingled with concept issues, the whole thing is going to get disregarded as incoherent. And I just think that's very important that it not be disregarded.
Laura, you were about to say
Well,
something.
I will just say that was the structure of the original letter as well, to have design feedback for specific intersections separate from scope feedback. There were multiple sections. But I mean, I agree with that approach as well. I do think that it's important for us. I agree with you. We're not engineers. Well, except that I would like Mariana's feedback, since she is in the planning world.
Yes, that's
so
true.
we do have professional expertise on this committee.
This isn't my specialty, but no comment.
But I also think that this is public comment. That's the point of this phase of of the public process is public comment. We are citizens who cross at these intersections on a regular basis. And the purpose of our letter is to provide feedback. And so I think that what I was trying to do in these intersection feedback pieces was to say, you know, we all recognize that we need more crossing infrastructure for people who are outside of vehicles. So all of the proposals that seek to provide even incremental, you know, positive steps towards, you know, safe crossings for pedestrians and cyclists is good. And the proposals that suggest widening the Route 2, you know, the number of lanes at those crossings. I mean, some of the design concepts that were laid out would have 7 lanes of traffic that you'd have to cross over. So I think that it's important for us to push back against that and say, like, you know, there's no scenario where people in Concord are going to feel safer crossing Route 2 if they're going from crossing 4 lanes or 5 lanes to 7 lanes or 8 lanes at these crossings, because some of these places where they were putting in multiple turning lanes and 1 additional travel lane in each direction, those intersections are going to become, I mean, 62 is already incredibly wide. To make that intersection wider and put more lanes of cars, like, you don't have to be an engineer, you just have to be a person who crosses the road to know that that is going to be intimidating in terms of mode shift. It's going to be counterproductive for our goals.
I agree with what you're saying, but you have to be careful how you structure the feedback. So for instance, I think you can make a comment fairly about the concept of widening, but I think what's more telling at the Main Street crossing is the lack of any conceptual indication of how they're going to deal with pedestrians crossing. For instance, there's nothing about an island. There's nothing about what happens if somebody gets caught halfway across the street. There's no safe place to go. There's no, hold on a second, I made notes. There's no statement about light timing and the importance of light timing for pedestrian crossing. And specifically, they should have conceptually a requirement for an ongoing operations and maintenance plan for the light synchronization. Because right now, they've already admitted that the light synchronization doesn't work, and it's not clear how many years it hasn't worked. So anyway, I think there are conceptual things lacking we should be pointing out.
Okay. Well, so Laura, maybe I didn't explain what I was proposing very clearly. What I was proposing was not to eliminate the feedback on the conceptual designs, but to put them in a middle section and have a first comment section that really essentially add a new criterion that should not be neglected in any of the future planning that MassDOT does for Route 2 corridor in Concord. So I guess one thing might be productive in moving us along here. I mean, it sounds like we might even need another meeting, but which is not impossible, I suppose, if we can get a quorum. But and I apologize that this kind of rewriting of things, rearranging things only kind of gelled in the last 24 hours. So it wasn't really possible, even less, to kind of get out a draft. But let me ask people, if we had an organization of this where we have the general comments that kind of are overarching, and they can talk about widening, whatever, but they're basically, you know, one of the major things, as was in Laura's draft, is the safe connectivity for multiple modes across Route 2. Do people agree that it's okay? It's useful to have a first section that's these general comments, second section that goes into all the different example conceptual designs that Laura had drafted, just maybe adding a few things or changing the language a little, and then a third section, which is future future studies or things that should be included in future studies so that they're comprehensive? Or do people think that's not a good approach?
I think that that's a great approach, Mark. The only thing is that I do know I'm noticing that you've changed sort of the last section to like this is what should be in future studies. We're providing a public comment on the existing study. So I think it's really important for us to say the scope of this study is flawed. I think that that is a
I
that
don't
is
think you can say that. They were
I think that
given
we have
scope.
to say that because the scope of this study doesn't take into account mode shift. It doesn't take into account our climate goals as a state or locality. Like we need to point out that, you know, that there are some premises that guided the design concepts in this study that are not in line with what we need to be achieving as
I think you run the risk that I think you run the risk if you attack the scope of what they were given, that they will discount all the feedback.
I don't think that's true.
Because you're telling them you reject the study. That's what you're telling them. I think it's fine. But that
may I speak for a second?
Go ahead, Phil.
I'm sorry, I'm on the
then
phone.
and then Elizabeth. Go ahead, Phil.
So MassDOT is an agency of the Commonwealth. It's under the executive. I heard someone say, oh, well, this is reviewed by representatives and this and that. That's not correct. This is produced as a document prepared by a arm of the executive branch of our government.
Phil, let me correct you. I said they were given the scope by those people, not that those people reviewed anything.
They weren't given a scope by those people, Nick. They cooked this up, in my view, by themselves, because that's what they do. They're an agency. The representatives had nothing to do with the production of this plan. You can call our representative and he will tell you that, okay? That's not what state representatives do. Second, I agree with Laura that unless we push back and say that the concept is flawed, they will not get it. And the idea that MassDOT is going to reject this is irrelevant, because ultimately what is going to happen is going to be a political decision which will be made by our representatives. All of us, or at least some of us, remember the Charles River crossing when the Lenny Zakim Bridge was planned. It took years to plan that out. And the reason why was that the first plan was a crock. It was a big time crock. In my view, this is also a big time crock. The way that MassDOT will get redirected is by the political forces. And in order for us to weigh in, we are not making design recommendations. We are talking about policy. And in my view, policy is if you don't stitch together the two halves of Concord, it's a fail, period. Thank you. Okay. Sorry for being brief.
No, thank you. Thank you, Phil. That's helpful. Elizabeth, you wanted to say something, I believe.
So this is just my experience. I'm going to land somewhere between Nick and Laura. It is my experience. You never tell the state that they are wrong. It doesn't come out good in the end, and that's the only thing they see. And I do agree with Nick that then you know their mode of thinking when they read turns just negative. I do think there are ways to strongly state in the letter just tax disappointment in the fact that this that mode shift wasn't considered, all these elements were not considered, and then direct the conversation to the state has this goal of and state as, and then pick up where Phil was, pick up these policy level things that the state, whether it's the governor, the legislator, and all of these things that especially now that we're talking about what's going to happen with MCI Concord, you have to think about these things, and the disappointment that what was presented didn't think about these or bring them into the conversation or have them be part of any discussion or solution is incredibly disappointing, and the committee urges them to really take a step back and look at these items. I think it can be phrased in a little bit different than the scope is flawed, because yeah, I do think they then just turn off and just don't bother.
Yeah,
I have a
Laura,
direct
yes.
follow-up to that. I just want to read what's in the original draft, because it says exactly what Elizabeth just said. It says, we are disappointed that the study scope did not include a thorough analysis of transit options and potential for mode shift. It goes on, and then the third paragraph says, we urge MassDOT to embrace strategies that promote public transit use, enhance cycling and pedestrian infrastructure, and reduce reliance on cars. I was very careful not to say, I think this is a crock. I was very careful not to say, I think that everything you did was wrong. I was trying to walk that line of being clear about our feedback is that this is not in line with where we are today. And I do want to just clarify, this study was initiated under the Baker administration. The scope of the study is set by the executive branch under the Baker administration. It takes a long time for these things to move forward. And so I think it's important to point out that it's not in line with where we are right now in terms of the goals of the state. So that was my comment.
Yeah, but I do think though, that by separating the way that Mark has suggested, you kind of, the problem right now, in my view, is that the scope feedback is mingled with the other feedback that's substantive about the concept. So I
totally agree with you that those things should be separated. My comment was actually just about the tone of that last section. I think Mark has softened it to the point of it being about future studies instead of it being a reaction to the current study. And I do also want to say, I spoke with other folks in other states about studies like this. I reached out to America Walks. They have a whole group of people who work on highway expansion. And they said that these kinds of conceptual level studies are where policies get set that drive implementation moving forward. This is an important moment for us to respond to MassDOT and say, we think that you're off base. We think that highway expansion in the 21st century is not the right policy for Massachusetts. It's not the right policy for Concord. So I think that it's really important for us to directly respond to the study and say that this study needs to be revised because of that. I don't think that we can say like, oh, well, a future studies, because it's going to take 15 years for another study to be published, and they're going to start working on this one. It says very clearly in the introduction to the study that they're going to start implementing ideas that are, they're going to start moving forward ideas that are laid out in this study. So I think that we need to be clear that this is a response to the study, not about what we should do after we expand the highway.
So there's a couple of things we can do that occurred to me. One of them is to put all of, okay, first of all, when we could put all of this right up front, general comment that we understand the limited scope of there was determined to be a limited scope, but we question whether the omission of significant things calls into question any of these, decisions, et cetera. Because I guess what I'm saying is, if I look back at what, and maybe I'm talking about something we've already sort of agreed to, the original draft starts out with the main thing about the widening, and the widening is significant, but the widening is not as important as what you were saying, Laura, about the omissions. Do you know what I'm saying? We're kind of getting into an implementation aspect, which is important and has a lot of implications. But I think going back to the original draft, what you said here about we're disappointed, that kind of thing, maybe listening to people here, needs to go right up front. In other words, but we have to say it in the appropriate way. Say that we're taking this study, accepting that this is a limited scope, but we think it's very problematic. And then I don't know if people feel like, I mean, it's easy to change the title. I took the most friendly title for a couple of reasons, but we can say critical omissions from what would have been a more comprehensive study or something like that. What we see as critical omissions from what is needed for a more comprehensive or useful study. Again, the point is I want to criticize the document, we can criticize the study, but another thing that, what Elizabeth's saying, that Phil is saying, but to add to that, remember that somebody in MassDOT agreed to a scope, and then they gave a consulting contract to VHB. And VHB is not necessarily, well, VHB has to do what they're asked to do for the contract, right? So we kind of want to make sure that we appreciate what work done, but we say this is not adequate for a reason of a scope, but not kind of blame people for the scope, but somehow in the most positive way say these things really need to be considered. And if you follow that argument a little further, it's almost saying we shouldn't even comment on any of the designs because they haven't taken into account all these other things. Go ahead, Laura.
Just in hopefully in service of moving us forward. I actually think that the structure of the letter is fine. I'm happy to leave the comments on the scope at the end because I think that it is important to respond to the designs that they laid out. I'm very happy with the way that you've laid out the second. You've broken it into 3 sections. I'm very happy with the second section. I prefer the original third section, although I'd be happy to soften the title of it. But the first section is where I think that we don't come out strongly enough in opposition to putting in an additional travel lane in each direction on Route 2. I think we just need to be really clear that we stand in opposition to making a 6-lane highway through Concord. I think it's important for the citizens of Concord, for the group that represents us, to say 6 lanes through Concord is not in our best interest. And then we can talk about the crossings itself, but I think it's very important to put that up front because that's central to all of this. Like the sidewalks and are like all of the rest is window dressing, but putting a 6-lane highway through Concord would be detrimental to our community.
I'm agreeing with you about finding a way to say that. The problem is if you say putting a 6-lane highway through Concord, that immediately gets discounted because they're not. They're just widening the intersections, and they will respond by saying, oh, we're not including, it's only still 4 lanes between the intersections, and that limits throughput. So I think I like what you're saying. There's some way we have to communicate this about the widening of the intersections, but we can't misrepresent what they're doing as widening the entire highway.
It does say in the study very clearly that they were trying to figure out how to widen the highway to 6 lanes. Like it, and the design concept.
But they said they couldn't.
Right. So in the original draft that I wrote, it does soften the language, Nick. It says our committee objects to scenarios outlined in the study that seek to expand Route 2 from 4 to 6 lanes entirely or partially through the Eastern Study area. Because it
take out the entirely, and I'm with you.
Okay. Well, we could just say from 4 to 6 lanes through the Eastern Study area, period.
No, and that's another thing. It's not the whole Eastern Study area. We're only competent to respond to Concord's changes, not the entire Eastern Study area.
Okay, through the town of Concord. That's fine. I don't mind changing.
And if you just change it so that it says specifically at the intersections, which is what they're doing, then it's totally accurate.
So we could say our committee objects to scenarios outlined in the study that seek to expand Route 2 from 4 to 6 lanes at areas within the town of Concord, or at intersections within the town of Concord.
Good. I'm with it. Okay.
Okay, so how shall we patch this together? What is What do people think is a good way to do it?
I
To go
wonder if
b-
we could take that first section from my letter and put it under the first heading of your general comments. It could be section 1A of that general comment section.
Mhm.
And then it naturally follows the other sections that you've written about the crossings, because
Okay.
this is like the
Okay.
high level, like we don't want these intersections to be wider. And then we talk about the importance of the connection pieces, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, you got to change the title from widening Route 2 to 6 lanes. That's all.
We could just say opposition to widening Route 2
Widening.
or
Widening.
highway widening or something like that.
Okay, hold on a second here. Okay, and then there
I
was
don't even, no, it's not widening Route 2. Proposed widening, opposition to proposed widening.
That's
Okay.
perfect.
And I'm not going to worry about capitalization here too much. So do I, okay,
And delete the Route 2 part
yeah,
too.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, our committee strongly rejects the scenarios outlined. Study seek to expand Route 2 from 4 to 6, either a pressure entire through the eastern study region
So just
through the town of
delete
Concord.
just
Yeah.
delete everything after the word lanes and say at intersections within the town of Concord.
Well, anyway, there's other concerns about land taking and natural preservation, all that. So I worry about an incremental thing where it's easy to widen it here, but we can't widen it there. I made a comment at the first public session when they did the PowerPoint that said, don't you want to have some consistency, and doesn't that actually help traffic? If people are going from 6 to 4 to 6 to 4, it's not so great, although some people disagree. But anyway, so let's pin this down. So from 4 to 6 travel lanes, either entirely or partially through the eastern study area within the town.
I like what she proposed was just delete after lanes.
Oh, delete the rest of the sentence.
Everything between there and the town of Concord to keep.
And just
Okay.
say at intersections within the town of Concord.
Is that okay with you,
Yeah.
Nick?
Yes.
Okay. At intersections within the town of Concord. Okay, hold on a second. Strike
Also,
out.
I'd love to just make sure we make space for Mariana and Phil to say anything generally.
Please dive in
Yeah.
at intersections. The town of Concord. Okay.
Some general comments. I'm not sure if or where they fit into the document, but just general. So assuming that, not assuming, but in the very possible case that they don't take our feedback on this, I thought it might be helpful to include a little bit more of like, okay, if you're going to widen it anyway, here's what we can still do to protect pedestrians and bicyclists crossing. I know that you mentioned the pedestrian refuges, and maybe we just want to like a little stronger emphasis on, like someone just said, the protected crossing in the mid, like a pedestrian island in the middle if you get stuck. The signal timing should not be an afterthought. And like emphasizing the protective barriers and stuff, because their goal here is to increase intersection capacity, and they may or may not be. Especially from a policy standpoint, I really hope that they are listening to our feedback on this. I didn't get to review the whole study as carefully as I would have liked. I didn't see anything in there about, was there anything about providing like a protected bike lane along Route 2?
No.
Is that a total
No.
pipe dream?
There's something vague about it, indirect, talking about other modes along the corridor, but it's just in passing. It's sort of a half sentence. I remember something, but yeah, it's sort of almost like they copied it from some other document. So with regard to the idea of the island and the light timing, which I think is really important, do we want to, I mean, we could put that in a particular crossing example, or right now on the screen, one of the kind of placeholder first general comments was safer at-grade intersection design guidelines for Route 2 are needed. We could fit in there refuge islands, timing, design and maintenance, or something like that. Would that be okay? I just want to make sure that some of the, if they only read the first sections and that we've gotten across for the public in Concord the most important things, and then we can always repeat them in the cases. But I'm a little bit I'm concerned that if our most important comments were to be only in the kind of critique of a hypothetical design option of multiple design options, that they're not going to stick. They'll just say, okay, we'll throw that one out. And so what do people think about
one of the things that I pulled, so just in terms of this point that Mariana was making, at the Walden Street crossing, they did do a lot of the things that we would like to see in terms of pedestrian refuges, shortened crossing distances, and a protected buffered bike lane. So we could move that feedback up into the general comments section to say, you know, enhanced pedestrian or, you know, enhanced facilities for vulnerable road users should be at all crossings. You know, and using that intersection as the example, clearly this is possible because you've proposed it for one of these intersections. This should be at all of the intersections.
Yeah, the trouble is they've got a lot more real estate to work with at the Walden Street crossing. They don't have that at Route 62. And I think if you say you should do the same thing, they're going to quickly say, well, we can't because we don't have enough land. Forget that.
Well, anyway,
so
I think.
Can I make a comment?
Go ahead, Phil.
I actually, sorry, Nick, and sorry to make this so political, but the Walden Street crossing is a crossing that leads to a state facility. That's why they're focused on it. And I agree with Laura that we should say, look what you did at Walden Street. Why don't you do it at all the other intersections? Because those are applying contemporary design standards and practices in this corridor. And, you know, because if we try, sorry for being so blunt about this, but I'm, you know, on the phone and just trying to get a message across.
Yeah. Thank you. It's good. It's good, Phil. Thank you.
In my view, and I'll just go back to the previous thing, the scope of this was artificially constricted, and so that's what the consultants spit out. I think it's our job to push back and say, you guys know what to do. You know, kind of created something that will lead to a result that you want. We are pushing back, and we want you to apply the same stuff that you did at Walden Street all the way along the corridor in Concord. And you know what to do. Do it, please. That's it.
Okay, I want to say something here. So what there's no problem with saying the same thing twice, but I do, you know, am concerned that things shouldn't get lost in terms of communication to the MassDOT and the consultant, because they both want to be perceived as as doing a good job, I believe. So one thing to do would be to say at this safer at-grade intersection design guidelines list, these should include such things as pedestrian refuge island, the thing about the lights, give me, you know, better wording, etc. For a good example, refer to the later comment about the Walden Street. And so we don't change anything about the Walden Street statement, but we simply put upfront in the first general comment, which you know, again, I'm trying to think about if they I don't want those important ideas about the pedestrian island or the light timing, which apply in theory to all intersections. I don't want them to get lost if somebody says, well, that was only about Walden Street, or that was only about something else. So we could, only about Route 2. So would people agree as a next step to try to add some words to what's up here as 1C, which is probably supposed to be 1D? I'm not hard and fast about this being the final form. I just wanted to help us make steps in the right direction. And
So I will offer to, whatever you end up with, I will offer to put it, I did email Mark, we're trying to be consistent with our board and committee letterhead, so everything looks official, and
Sure.
so I did send that to you, Mark, but
okay.
just a comment. You never send letters using like 18 point, especially
Yes,
to the state.
It sounds screamy. It sounds screamy.
Yeah,
I know.
Screamy's a good.
Yeah. Okay.
Henry Dane used to send emails all in caps, and it used to drive me nuts.
Yeah. Well,
but,
I'm focusing on the content. I completely
yes,
agree.
no,
Format.
So I just put that offer out there.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I have a logistical question for today and for our process today.
Yeah.
Are we aiming to end at 10:30?
I
jump off at 10:30.
I have to leave at 10:30, so.
Yeah, I kind of have to leave at 10:30 too.
Okay.
So I just want to ask if there is a way for us to, I think that we've provided some general feedback. I think we've got a structure here. We've got 3 sections: general feedback, specific feedback on intersections, feedback on the scope. I think that I'm hearing a consensus that we need to strike a balance between, not super strident and not too gentle either. So somewhere perhaps in between our 2 drafts, Mark. And we're keeping the section about widening, but we've made some modifications to that. We need to beef up a section on how to improve pedestrian and cycling facilities should they at these at-grade intersections if grade separated crossings are not a possibility. So I'm just wondering if somebody could take these ideas, finalize a draft, and if we would feel comfortable submitting it as is, or if we would need another meeting, just because we're going to run out of time in 13 minutes.
Elizabeth, if we did something like what Lori's suggesting and someone drafted something and it was sent around and no one had any comments other than supporting it, would that be a violation of OML? You're muted.
What I imagine will happen right now is this draft that Mark has, we'll send it. What I can do is he can send it to me. I'll put it on the letterhead and can then send it out to everybody in this track change mode and in a clean mode, and people can provide their comments back to me if they're like non-substantive. Then we can just change them and then send it along.
Okay, so
that's not a violation.
But if we have substantive changes,
we could take a vote today to agree to that, and that if there are no substantive changes, that is the letter from the committee.
Although it sounds like somebody needs to write the section on the pedestrian.
I can write that bit that I said about the traffic lights and the whatever in the island.
Okay, and do we agree? I'm not advocating for this. I'm just questioning.
And I will send it
safer at-grade intersection design guidelines. I mean, I think that's important because they're not proposing any non-at-grade,
Right.
I would just. You might want to modify it so that it's clear that we're talking about vulnerable road users, because they would argue these are safer designs for the at-grade intersections for cars. And our feedback is specific to vulnerable road users.
I would specifically say pedestrians and bicyclists. That's as specific as you can get. So I think that's good. Okay.
Okay. So you'll take that.
I'll do that and I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you.
Well, send it to Elizabeth, and if Elizabeth is willing to then kind of uniformize the format,
Okay.
then that can be posted as the new draft. And I mean, how many people could meet sometime between now and the day it had the 25th, just for a very, very short time?
I could.
I could.
I could. Yeah.
What's
let's
the meeting
You
posting?
need to ask Phil
Phil.
if he can meet.
Phil.
I'm sorry, what?
Oh, if we need to have a meeting, let's see, today's 18th, 2021, 22. I mean, if we needed to have a very short meeting,
Monday or
and
Tuesday.
Monday or two. Well, if it's Monday at the same time, it's too late to post it anyway.
So briefly,
but Tuesday,
I'm out
let's
of
say,
town.
okay. But
I'm out of town. Sorry.
okay, I'll have to ask Dan. I mean, we can post the meeting for Tuesday anyway. Same.
Yep.
It's 9:30. Okay.
Yep.
Let's post a meeting, because I have a feeling we're going to have some I feel like people, because we're
Yep.
not at a point where
We need
have
another
a
round. We need
at this point.
I agree. We need another quick round. But if Nick and Elizabeth will,
I'm not available at that time. I could do Tuesday afternoon, but Heather can get your Zoom meeting going, and but
okay.
I cannot be there Tuesday morning.
Okay. Does it matter to Nick and Laura and Mariana?
Anytime Tuesday. Anytime.
What about
Tuesday.
Monday afternoon? Is Phil around on Monday afternoon? Because we haven't passed the
Yeah.
meeting posting for the afternoon yet.
No.
Phil?
Bill, you are.
I'm on a bike trip, so I'm not available next week.
Okay.
I'm out.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
All right. I will communicate
All right.
with
I will communicate with
somebody.
somebody.
Phil's got an echo. Elizabeth, could you mute Phil?
Yeah, but now I don't know if he can unmute himself, but that's okay.
Oh.
I did.
So Mark, if you could work with Dan to find a time on Monday afternoon or even Monday evening or Tuesday morning. I'm free at all those times. I don't know if Phil and Mariana could chime in with their availability.
I'm available.
Where was that, Tuesday afternoon?
Tuesday afternoon, evening, or Monday morning.
Yes.
Okay. Monday. Wait a minute. It would. Hello. It would have to be Monday afternoon or sometime Tuesday. And
yes,
I'm going to say let's default to 9:30 a.m. Tuesday. But if we need to shift it, you guys are okay. Let me see what Dan can do.
Okay.
Okay.
And
if
you could
just let Heather and I know, and we'll get an agenda posted.
Thank you very much. Okay, thanks everybody.
One more thing, Phil, that I'd like to see. I think it's important to include in our reference to the town's desires for crossing Route 2. This came up in the long-range plan, and the long-range plan has some amount of power and attention getting with the state. So I think it's important to mention that as well, that was a place where it came up.
Laura?
That wording was in the original letter that I did before. You can refer to that letter to pull the language out.
I agree with Nick.
Yeah.
So just in terms of me understanding what's happening next, Nick has offered to take one section that he's going to write out that's going to be added to the general comments section. Mark, are you consolidating the comments from today and giving us a clean draft of the rest of the document?
Oh, Elizabeth is.
I don't know if Elizabeth agreed to that.
No, I thought that's what she said she would do. Elizabeth?
So Mark is going to send me this working draft right here. Nick's gonna send me, you're gonna send me a paragraph, correct?
Yep.
I'm gonna include it in that other 1B, the safe intersection crossing for pedestrians and bicycles. That's what I'm in, taking Nick's sending me, putting it in there. I'm going to put this in a different format. I will send the clean version out to everybody to review. And
please post it too.
Yep, and then I will post it, and you guys can send me back if you your edits, and I will begin to put together an edited version for your meeting on Tuesday.
Okay, and Elizabeth, I'll send you a reminder too to pull out the language from the original letter we did a couple of months ago that referred to the long-range plan, because I think that's important to include.
Original letter.
Yeah, can you pull that out, Nick, and send it, or do you want to?
Okay, I'll get it. Yeah, I'll
if you
send
do
it.
it, that'll facilitate.
My only concern is that we didn't really get to the third section. We talked about the third section, but we didn't actually change anything. So I said that I feel much more comfortable with the language in my original draft for the third section on the scope. I haven't read your draft, Mark. So my question is, could you come to some compromise between the two versions? Because I don't want it to be about future studies. I want it to be about the scope of this study. And so right now it's not written in that way.
That's a lot of that's changing the title, I think. So.
Well, I haven't read Mark's draft, so I don't know what's in here.
Yeah, I can. I'll shift it around quick before I send it to Elizabeth.
Okay.
Thank you.
That okay. All right. And
any other comments in the meantime to Elizabeth or Mark?
Yes, so Elizabeth. Send them to Elizabeth to put in. I mean, there can be for the draft that appears, there can be sections that we then decide to leave in or strike out. Real quick, it would any member of the public or observer like to make a comment, or are we all set? Ned Perry.
Yes, thank you. And really, my comment is to thank this committee for such a great discussion and focusing on this in the middle of the summer. Great job. Similarly, you could take that thanks and turn it around and thank the state or the contractor here for the work that they've done so far, putting a positive spin on it. Third, I think the Walden Street crossing idea of expanding that to all the crossings is great. And then in a plan of Route 2 that I looked at several months ago, it appeared to me that there is state land on both sides of Route 2 going towards the MBTA underpass, where a bike trail or walking trail could be added going to the underpass. It's a strange idea. I thought I'd expressed it before. Maybe it's already been dismissed, but down the road, maybe Elizabeth or someone in the planning office could look into that. Thank you very much, and thank you for all that you are doing on this letter.
Thank you, Ned.
My apologies, I wasn't actively listening. In the future, planning division should look into what?
They're on a diagram of Route 2 and in this study that they did, it appeared to me that there was enough land, it doesn't have to be much land, I think it's 10 feet wide, going on the east and west side of Route 2 over to the MBTA underpass, and then scooting a 10-foot section in the underpass for walkers and bikers. As you may know, I mean, I'm sure you know, the MBTA tells people, handicapped people, to get off in West Concord and then to get to Concord Center by going across Route 2. That's unsafe, as everybody here agrees. And so I just tried to come up with a safe underpass, and to expand that MBTA, I sat through a webinar, as maybe others did last week, of the MBTA financial crisis. So they're not I think, ready to do work with a lot of towns, but that's just an issue to look at. And I don't know if that would work or not, but it's an idea. Thank you for your time.
Yep. So I do know, and I think Laura's brought this up, and I've heard this in the community and other places, advancing the conversation with the right people in the state, because we have rails to trails, and there are communities that are starting rails with trails. And why I do believe certain people have looked at the MBTA commuter rail underpass under Route 2, and it is wide enough to accommodate a rail with trails. And so there already is people in the community wanting to advance that conversation. So
As usual, you're way ahead of me, Elizabeth. Thank you very much.
I doubt that, but awesome.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I'm going to close the meeting
Great.
and maybe talk on Tuesday. Have a good weekend, everybody.